Welcome to Basic Grammar for Serious Writers. Firstly, relax. Being a serious writer does not mean you must be a humorless human, nor does it mean you cannot have a great deal of fun doing the thing you love. I'm Dylan Brody. I will serve as your guide through this program put together by Active Voice Productions. As a storyteller, a filmmaker, an author, as a lyricist, a poet, a humorist, playwright, as a stand-up comic, and a songwriter, I use words and think a great deal about grammar, syntax, and the details of language. I am absolutely delighted to take part in this project, and I hope you see the value in it that I do. This has been a lifelong engagement, certainly more conscious in its exploration than could possibly prove meaningful to anyone whose life does not revolve around the use of words spoken, performed, or printed. For those of you who do work in these fields, a personal story might serve to move us forward. My snooty academic parents so regularly corrected my grammar at home that fourth grade instruction in the parts of speech and proper sentence structure felt redundant. So thoroughly acquainted was I with the basics of literacy, so prepared to raise my hand and give correct answers, that in my late 50s now, I recall clearly my one incorrect offering in our English class. I remember the look of confusion on the teacher's face. As certain as ever that I knew the response, I raised my hand and announced that the apostrophe made the noun possessive, so this example would be belonging to it. Her disappointment that I had been daydreaming through her explanation of its as the exception to the rule sent me into blushing, shrinking shame. Incorrect grammar demanded correction in my world. Of course, anyone would want to know if they'd been misusing language, so as not to do so in the future. I corrected grammar mid-conversation as my parents had corrected me, well into adulthood, believing it a sign of affection, a familial intimacy. In 2009, my wife pointed out that I would correct people on the difference between nauseous and nauseated, meaning I was not just the ass who would correct people's grammar, I was the ass who would do it when they were at their most vulnerable. More than that, it meant I corrected people on word usage long after the language itself had changed, making them more correct than was I. Nauseous has come to mean suffering from nausea. It once meant causing nausea. That it once meant causing nausea means nothing in the face of commonly accepted meaning. I mentioned this to my friend Ben, a writer who has made a lot more money in the entertainment industry than I have, and therefore believes himself right about anything we disagree on. In Hollywood, the person who has the most industry money gets to pontificate. Also, at a four-way stop, the most expensive car proceeds first. When I told Ben my wife's line about correcting people at their most vulnerable, he made the snorting noise that television captioning people call scoffing, though I think of scoffing as showing disdain, and I think of snorting as the sound one sometimes makes when scoffing, but at other times as acknowledgement or as a chuckle. Often, I say, that wasn't scoffing aloud in my living room, but the television captioning people do not hear me. Ben said, with absolute certainty he has, after all, made a good deal more industry money than I, "It doesn't matter. Usage is king. People understand each other. That's what matters." Anger rose in me that I did not display. The desire to lash out, to explode, to yell at this friend grew from deep resentment. The idea that he, less educated than I, less well-prepared academically for a literary career, less well-read, less talented by my reckoning, less intelligent by anybody's reckoning, had found success and financial reward of which I have dreamt, drove a thumb into the pressure point of personal grievance. The hope that he might open a door to a job or an agent kept my ego and my anger in line. Also, I knew that I held on to rules and definitions beyond obsolescence. I would need time alone with my response to excavate layers of dismay and self-sabotage, nature, nurture, ego, and intellect. My insistence on correct usage lived as part of my onstage persona now. The pomposity of bringing academic standards to casual conversation, a source of self-ridicule. I recognized that my assumptions about linguistic accuracy did not apply to everyone in the language-using world, despite having been raised in a bubble of literary critique and syntactic perfectionism. I'm not the only person who reacts emotionally around grammar. Once I had a mentor for a minute. During a lunch, he asked me a question about what direction the restaurant window was orientated. I said, well, firstly, oriented. Orientated is not a word. He said, and when you do that, I want to smash this glass and grind it into your face. And he walked out and no longer served as my mentor. Thinking about it now, years later, I recognize how disorienting it must have been for him. He executive produced a TV series for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. If anything, I should have adopted his extra syllables. Maybe I'd have landed a job on his next staff. While my wife's observation about my insensitivity to others changed my behavior around such corrections, certainly in public, I remained firmly committed to the idea that learning the rules of grammar serves us powerfully. I journaled about my grammatical hang-ups. I clarified. I essayed. Ben, who declared usage to be king, the former mentor who stormed away, enraged to learn he had been speaking gibberish, any other writer who would protect an ego at the expense of refined craft, allows the comfort of self-satisfaction to inhibit growth. We all must learn to use our meager tools with ever greater proficiency. The more we understand language and how to use it correctly, the more efficiently we can use it ourselves. On the page and in performance, the reader or audience learns much about a character through the way he, she, they use their language. The humor of Mrs. Malaprop and later Norm Crosby evaporates if any word may be thrown into any sentence, because as long as the listener can figure it out, it's fine. We discern class, education, geography, or personal history from the way a character speaks. To properly adjust our writing to reveal and reflect this, we must first have a baseline understanding of correct usage as well as current common usage. Without that knowledge, we can only write characters who speak as we do ourselves. Language expresses thought, but it also shapes it. If we cannot explore the differences in language use, we lose access to the very thought processes that differentiate between people, between characters. We give up an enormous opportunity to convey more information more clearly, more effectively, more efficiently. How a character speaks matters more, perhaps, than what he or she says. Understanding how use and misuse of language will affect a listener frees us to show characters for who and what they are, rather than needing to write about them. Knowing the subject of your sentence matters as much as knowing the subject of your story. Learn the rules of language. Learn them with joy. You use language professionally. Genuinely take time to learn and understand how a sentence works to convey an idea and how to structure one properly. Beyond the power and control this offers over your own writing, you will be able to create materials and to speak to people at all levels of education and the industry, at all levels of income and authority, without embarrassment, without self-judgment, and you'll retain the ability to use language however you like among friends, family, and in casual circumstances. Code switching, the name for this skill, has been part of the immigrant experience and the African American experience as long as this nation has claimed land ownership. Moreover, the more you understand how the best educated speak as opposed to the most pious, the wealthiest as opposed to the most confident, and so on, the more you expand your own empathic range as a human being. Not only will you develop tools to recognize and emulate the linguistic structures that best accomplish your intentions, you will also be able to sense from the use of language a great deal about every person you encounter, creating the opportunity for greater connection, faster bonding, and clearer communication. I called Ben. I explained this idea to him, that as professionals, as serious writers, we must be willing to go beyond the common, beyond a lazy usage is king attitude, to become kings of usage. He scoffed, I guess, over the phone. He said, "You think too much about this, man. You just gotta figure out what sells and stop thinking about what you're saying all the time. That's the difference between you and I." I winced, but I did not correct him. We can be different, he and I. But let's keep my judgmentalism between you and me. Whether you are a serious writer or an aspiring writer who is just deciding to get serious now, we have workshops, coaching, and all sorts of options for you over at activevoiceproductions.com. Just click on Education.